All right, so some troubling data here today. We wanted to get more detail on this. So cancer in Canada is what this is titled, and the problem with this story is Quebec leads the way as far as every other province in this country with a number of cancer cases reported, and this is current. This is for 2025. Dr. Chris Labos, cardiologist, of course, with a degree in epidemiology and a regular contributor here on CJAD 800, is on this story for us today. Chris, thanks so much for being here this afternoon. Look, there are a couple of things I said that are troubling. Number one, that Quebec is at the top of the list. And number two, and you don't have to look very far down the story to see that Quebec has the highest incidence of breast cancer yet in the country as well. So I guess part of the question is, what's going on? I thought we were doing a good job in terms of, cancers and screenings for breast cancer.
Yeah, and we are. And I think you just have to sort of look at, there is a little bit of nuance to this. So clearly, cancer diagnoses are going up, but they are being driven by two large demographic shifts in our population. One, that the population is getting older, and the other one, that the population is getting bigger. So just by virtue of the fact that we have a growing population and an aging population, you are going to see more cancer diagnoses. Now, even if you adjust, when you adjust for population, Quebec does still have a higher rate than the rest of the country. But the differences are notable. They are significant, but they are not drastic. So Quebec is going to have about 660 new cancer diagnoses per 100,000. You look at the other provinces like Ontario, it's 598. Manitoba is 576. So it is lower, but it is not lower by a drastic margin. And, there's a few factors that could explain this. We have higher rates of smoking in Quebec, so that is partially driving it as well. So it's certainly not a good news story, but it's not necessarily as bad as the headline would sometimes make you think.
Yeah, the idea being that it's not like 3 times as much as anywhere else. You're right. I mean, you could split hairs if you wanted to, but we're at the top of the list. But what about the breast cancer issue specifically?
Yeah, well, that's a troubling one, because here's the thing. The minute you have a universal screening strategy for breast cancer, you would assume that you're going to catch all the cases. You have to also be a little bit careful about when you're talking about cancer diagnoses, because it's possible that you're just catching more cancer cases, but you're treating them effectively and you're not seeing the cancer mortality. But even in terms of cancer mortality, Quebec does rank up there with the other provinces too. So if you have a universal breast cancer screening program, you will catch all the cancer cases, but if you then go off and treat them, then maybe your cancer mortality will be going down. So that is a troubling statistic in and of itself. I think, though, when you zoom out and you look at the historical trends for cancer mortality and breast cancer mortality, they have been trending downwards over the past couple of decades, reflecting the fact that treatment and surgical techniques have overall improved. So, you would like to think in Quebec that we would be doing better, given that we have a universal screening program. And overall, things are better now than they were 20 years ago. It's just that relative to the other provinces, maybe we're not as efficient as we would like to be.
All right. The other question I have still related to this is with respect to screening, right? So is there an average age? Because I understand in Quebec it's 50. Some people are pushing for 40, but that hasn't happened yet. How significant is that, and how does that compare to the rest of the country?
Yeah. So we could do a whole half hour about what's the proper age to start screening for breast cancer. And the short version of that is it depends. The younger you have the cutoff, the more cases you will catch, but also the more false positives you will get, and the more women that you will send for unnecessary biopsies. Now, if you were to ask most women, they would say, I would take the trade-off. I would rather get an unnecessary biopsy rather than risk missing a case of breast cancer. And so for most people, that trade-off is an acceptable one. So if you wanted to push the age down from 50 to 45, I think that is an arguable point. Once you start getting down to 40, that balance starts to work against you. So there's a bit of a gray zone of where the optimal age is. It's probably somewhere between 45 and 50, and that's why you see some variability between various jurisdictions about what the optimal starting age is. I think the one point to highlight is that if you have an individual risk factor like a family history or a genetic diagnosis like BRCA1, you should definitely start breast cancer screening early. The problem is that requires a doctor to see you and to order the test that's not going to be caught up in sort of the province-wide screening program, which is made for average risk women that don't have any specific risk factors.
And are mammograms still, I mean, you talk about the possibility of a false positive. The more you see, the more that chance is likely. I understand that. Are mammograms still considered sort of the way to go here? Is there an alternative kind of treatment you could take now?
So interestingly enough, once you start getting into younger age groups, mammograms start to have more issues with them, and that's where something like ultrasound might be preferable, and even MRI might be preferable. And this is, again, the shortcoming of a universal screening system where you're just screened automatically. You're screened automatically with a mammogram. You then need a physician to look at the result and say, well, no, actually an ultrasound would be better than do the ultrasound. And that is sort of done, for the most part. Like the physician who's reading the mammogram, if they see something, will sort of take charge of that finding. I mean, the ideal would be if everybody had their own doctor, and then you could get the screening modality that is, designed for you. Certainly in the U.S., with high-risk women, you are seeing more and more breast MRIs being done. Here in Canada, I think they're largely reserved for sort of the more complex cases. Ultrasound, definitely the cheaper and easier to access option when you have young, dense breasts where mammograms don't perform as well.
All right. As you said, I'm sure there'll be a lot more time for discussion on this. We don't have that time. I was going to get to cervical cancer. I know that's mentioned in the study as well, but maybe we can do that at another time.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Dr. Chris Labos, who, by the way, you can hear here on CJAD. He's on every Sunday on Weekends with Joanne Vrakas. That's at 7:20 a.m. Dr. Chris Labos.
Introducing Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio. Hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
Join me for an insider look on a wild ride through 40 years of global rock and roll.
Bryan Adams Radio. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app. Or ask your smart speaker to play Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio.
Who's ready to rock?
Kids wanna rock.